seats anywhere you like. Okay, so this is my seat on the end, and now I'm going to introduce all of you individually. So joining me today is the CEO of Plugsurfing, Tatu.
Hi,
hello.
Great to be here.
Hello, welcome. We also have a Senior Manager for Charging Infrastructure and Smart Energy at Lucid Motors, Barry Soul.
Hi, good to be here as well.
Hello to you, Barry. Then we have the COO and co-founder at Spirii, Torben Fog.
Hi, that's me.
And last but certainly not least, the co-founder and managing partner on GreenWay Infrastructure, Peter Badik.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Hello. So everyone, so many questions. When we look at the entire industry, in your opinion, there are a lot of challenges, but what do you see as the biggest challenge facing the e-mobility industry? Where do we even begin? Like, what is the big challenge that we want to tackle? Yes.
Yeah, so my favorite pick for the biggest challenge, at least, would be definitely data quality and the interoperability of different systems. I mean, the European EV ecosystem, that's a pretty complex one. And it's built on different companies collaborating with each other, exchanging information between each other, and still there are too many interpretations of standards and protocols, etc. So we need to really work as an industry to fix those.
So quality is one major challenge. Do you agree?
Absolutely, to a certain point. But I think there are also some low-hanging fruits. I believe, and you are not necessarily, you don't have to be in agreement with me, but since we're here at Hobject, roaming could be an interesting topic to touch. And I think still there are many places where we could sort of liberate the mobility much faster if we could implement roaming in a much wider sense. I mean, just driving from south to north or the other way, we will all, if you try that, stumble over issues where we would wish that it was easier to connect to public chargers around. So that will definitely be one thing. Another issue is something that we all have seen recently, probably still seeing issues with supply chain. Can I get chargers out there fast enough? Can I get cars, electric cars out there fast enough? So little issues there. And for sure also what have been mentioned in some of the recent sessions, like electricity pricing is teasing us a little bit these days, and how do we overcome that? So that was just something, but we could talk for hours about issues and challenges.
For sure. I was trying to put everyone on the spot by asking to name one, but clearly there's numerous things that we still are going to have to be tackling looking forward. Some other thoughts? Yeah?
Maybe I will add another one is definitely the speed, how we can roll out the charging infrastructure, and when it comes to energy connection. So basically how the DSO are able to support us with a very ambitious plan for electrification. I think there are many great companies, even here in the room, which wants to roll out chargers as fast as possible. And to a certain extent, it was possible so far because we use the energy infrastructure which was already in place, but we are, I think, coming to the limits, and some locations it will be very hard to add the new chargers or find the new locations where you can add the chargers and having appropriate the power connection. So in general, going forward, taking into account that we are very early still in a business, and still there is less than a few percentage of the battery electric vehicles on the road, we need much more infrastructure. We are extremely ambitious plans. I think everybody in the industry, and I'm really sure if the DSO, which have to provide us the grid connection, are able to basically run the same speed with us.
Maybe some thoughts from you?
Yeah, so obviously from the OEM side, the challenges are slightly different, but in terms of public charging, I would underscore what Tatu said. The POI data is really important. How do we make sure that when we guide a customer to a charge point, it actually is there, it actually is working, and whatever EMSP he's using, it's going to work with the vehicle as well. This is really important because, you know, people don't want to have to think about charging cars. Anyone who drives an ICE, they don't think about refueling. Wherever I go, it's always going to work every time. That's currently not the case with charging today, and that is because of the different interpretations of the standards, right? So from the EV to the EVSE, this sometimes always doesn't work. Sometimes the session breaks up, especially with the ISO 15118, or even for CPOs with multiple different hardware, the OCPP is not always working the way it should work. So we really need to make sure that we have better mechanisms in place to make sure that stations that are deployed and they say plug and charge, or they say whatever it is, that are going to work with virtually every vehicle. I mean, we should really get to a point in the industry where customers don't really have to think long or hard about charging. It's just something that happens intuitively and conveniently.
Now, your companies, your respective companies, represent different types of players in the e-mobility ecosystem, but what would you say made your company's business model successful? So what were the key things that really took it off the ground? So who would like to begin?
Yeah, well, I guess we might have overlapping things here, but I'll just throw in some things, and then you guys take it away with your thoughts as well. But I think one of the things that we've been quite successful with is to, for sure, from the very beginning, think about scaling. When the success comes, how can we ensure that we can scale with the market before the market actually demands, and in multiple countries at the same time, with currency, languages, 24/7, 365 service, and whatever. So all these things matters, but it's also a matter of finding the strategy for whatever entity you come from, make the strategy and ensure there's a business model that supports the strategy. And of course, sometimes you might guess wrong, and then it's also super important to have maybe a little bit of an adaptive approach or an agile approach, so that you change your strategy and your business model to support whatever weird regulations there might be out there, in order to kick forward and continue to scale fast.
I think you touch on something really interesting, because I think sometimes when we are talking about scaling up, we just think it means bigger, but it actually is not just bigger, because at least in terms of expanding a market, it also means becoming more international, and then you have to think about local requirements, regulations, habits, preferences, and also, as you mentioned, and then sometimes things are not what you expect, so then you need to be able to react quickly, to be flexible, to learn and to adapt your business models and decisions according to situation on the ground. So several different ways of thinking about scaling up. Want to add something?
Yeah, so scaling. Plugs, I mean, I totally agree with you. There are two sides to scaling. It's the volume, it's technical, and then there are commercial things. Plugsurfing having 27 countries in Europe. So, I mean, that already brings quite a lot of complexity, managing just the value-added taxes for those. But I want to highlight one thing, which is technical. So, I mean, there is always this dilemma. You need to get customers quick. So that means that you need to develop something quickly. You need to respond to customer demand, and you need to go out to the market with that offering quickly. And that's what we did, for example. I mean, we did our MVPs and built new MVPs on top of our old MVPs, etc. And suddenly we ended up with a product that didn't scale. So we took a couple of years back pretty hard decision that, hey, we need to redo everything technically, and design everything for the scale. And it was painful for the team. I mean, it took us 1 year to redo the tech stack. It was painful for the customers because we were basically focusing on ourselves while doing that. But we had to do it because now we know that we have a platform that scales. So scaling requires also difficult choices that you need to take along the way.
Yeah, I agree that it is scaling up is extremely important. Basically, every part of this business is growing so rapidly. Said in 5 years is going to look very differently. And actually, if you ask what is I think successful, what made, for example, our company successful, I think it's a right combination of, this hard skills, the infrastructure company where you do this typical infrastructure work, finding the location, dig the cables, procure the good technology for the chargers, but as well combine it very carefully and mindfully from the very beginning with how you handle your data, how you handle your IT systems. And actually, you may be surprised that on infrastructure companies like ours, the biggest team is actually the IT team. And it's extremely important how you handle internal processes and how you handle your external communication towards other players, towards roaming platforms. If you need to plan from very beginning, as you said, for scaling up these things and understanding that without the proper processes and IT system, it's not going to work.
Yeah, I think for us, obviously our business model is selling cars. It's not the electrons or the CPO business. And the reality is today, charging is probably one of the biggest pain points in owning an electric car, especially in Europe. It's extremely complicated. There are so many CPOs, which ones work, which ones don't work. So we addressed this by really ensuring that we could get the maximum range out of the vehicles, that we can drive as far as possible without needing to charge, so try to limit that. And when charging, we try to keep the charging time as low as possible, so trying to keep a very high peak power when it comes to charging. And this does alleviate some of those pain points, but it comes back to when the customer is able to find a charge point, is it available, is it going to work, what happens if I get somewhere and the EMSP is having issues and I'm unable to charge? Does that mean customers still need to carry 2 different charging cards around or 3 different apps? These are still issues that we need to address, but for us, going into this, we knew charging is a pain point, it's something we have to resolve, and we did this by really trying to push out as much range through efficiency as possible.
So that's one way of encouraging people to adopt an electric vehicle. Like, forget charging is a catastrophe, it's a disaster, but don't worry, my car has enough range that I don't have to panic that I need to get to another charger.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a catastrophe or a disaster. I think it's just, if you think about the average consumer coming from an ICE vehicle to a battery electric vehicle, it is far more complicated than refueling. When you buy a car today, you might think about the cost of fuel as the total cost of ownership, but you don't think about where and how to refuel. That just happens, it works perfectly. And this is still pretty complicated, right? So even from the sales journey, trying to sell the car, we need to educate customers right at the beginning. Where are you going to charge? How are you planning on charging? Will you charge at home? What about long trips? What happens when you take your summer, winter holiday? Where are you going to stop? Making sure that they understand what's possible and making sure that it's as easy as possible for them to sign into whatever programs they need to be signed into.
Torben, you wanted to add something? Yeah?
Yeah, I'm just thinking that you're touching a super important point. Of course, like everybody else in here, also driving electric for private and business purposes, and especially this with having to access chargers around, both at home, but also when you drive around. To be able to make it easy for the user, I think it's super important to control your charger at home and access chargers in the public with the same app, for instance. We realized that some time ago, a long time ago actually, and then we implemented the possibility to have your home charger in the same app. You can see all your consumption there, you can control it, and some of the chargers out there allows for special functionality, spark charging functionality, so turn up and down the brightness of the LED and tons of other good things. But the ability to control your charging at home, see the electricity pricing, and maybe use that for your input on when to charge or not, or CO2 impact and so on. And then bring the same app with you when you are driving short distances or long-haul distances where you need to recharge is super important for the user. We also had some wishes from our customer base that they wanted to use smartwatches for charging. So we have also implemented that on Apple Watches in the beginning. At least that's what a lot of people seems to be using. So if you don't really want to take the plastic card out and use that when you're charging, well, some people like that, and other people like to use an app, but now there's also the possibility to simply use an Apple Watch if you like that idea. But it's a matter of supporting the customers where they are and with the wishes they have. And these wishes are not static, they seem to move with the penetration of EVs and the possibilities.
So I'd agree with that. I think when it comes to charging, less is certainly more. right? The less apps I have to worry about, the less cards I have to carry around with me, the better. So this goes back to the point of, we need to improve roaming as much as possible so that somebody can drive from Norway all the way down to Portugal and not have to think twice, like, do I have the right cards? Or I have a lot of colleagues coming over from the US at the moment, and even that's a bit of a problem because having a US account for the app stores when they get to Europe just to download the EMSP apps, they're not available because they're locked into a certain store. So then they use US credit cards, which sometimes are rejected on the charging stations. What do? It's still, unnecessarily complicated, and we've made major strides in the last few years to get it better, but it's not that easy. And I think the reality is people really, they just want to drive cars, they don't want to charge cars. So the way I always hold this, and my part of the business at Lucid is charging, but I see charging as the infrastructure around the core product, right? I could go out today and buy the new iPhone 14 or whatever it was just announced and spend $1,000 or 1,000 euros on a smartphone, but if my Wi-Fi at home is bad and I choose a SIM card with poor coverage or slow data speeds, the entire user experience of having that product is really going to be bad. It's going to put me off doing that. I might switch vendors or something else in the future. What that means for eMobility is if that experience of home charging, of public charging, is really bad, people will go back to ICE vehicles. This is exactly which we don't want to see happening.
If I may comment, everything is completely right, but on the other side, let's have a look with a clear eye on an industry. The industry itself reasonably exists maybe 5-6 years. There is roughly 200 producers of a charger, more than 100 EMPs, roughly the same number of CPOs in Europe, and several producers of the car. If you combine all these things and multiply all these various connections, and you can understand what is the scale, what scale of the challenges in front of us when we as an industry should deliver as we want basically the seamless experience. I think we need to a little bit slow down. It will take a few years. Probably some kind of a consolidation needs to be done, so there are not so many players talking to each other. Definitely we should work a bit about how we enforce the implementation of the standards, and probably we will need to impose on ourselves a kind of a regulation as well, where basically we'll say, okay, you need to do it in this way, otherwise it's not going to talk to each other. But the scale is very big. I would say complexity of this business is not smaller than complexity of any telecom business. And we know how hard it is and how hard it was in 90s, 20s, just to call somewhere, you switch the SIM cards, you try to get the right roaming operator, not to pay a fortune for a 20 minutes call. I think we will settle, but it will take a few times, and it will require a huge amount of human innovations and energy to get there.
So I'll just add to that. So I'm not really sure we can limit the amount of players in the market, right? It's a free market. There can be as many CPOs, EMSPs as possible. Will all of them survive? Probably not, right? So we might end up with a shrinking of the market at some points. But where this, in my opinion, becomes more complicated than the telecommunications industry, because that was really one phone calling another phone going over a cell phone tower. We still need that infrastructure, right? Most of the public charging stations use LTE or some kind of mobile data network. So what happens when the customer rocks up and tries to do public charging? There's so many places where there could be a problem. It could be the communication between the vehicle and the charger and the CPO backend. It could be the data provider. If they're using a mobile data provider, that could be having an issue with their network. It could be to the roaming platform. It could be to the EMSP. Maybe it's an OEM that's white-labeled that EMSP. There are so many links in this value chain for the customer, and if any one of them breaks, they cannot charge. And that is kind of a problem. We need to figure out how to make this as robust as possible. But you did raise a very good point. I think what we need to do is not just have certification as in, yes, you have a CE stamp and this product is safe to sell and operate in Europe or wherever in the world. But we need a kind of certification that's in place that says this adheres to these standards. And that means there's like a 99.999% chance of, regardless of what EV you drive and regardless of what EMSP you have and what EVSE station you plug into, it's going to work. I think that's where we really have to get into. We have to get this trust in customers that I don't have to think about charging anymore. It's not a showstopper to buying an EV. In fact, it's a convenience factor for me because I can charge at home, I can charge at work, I can charge at the gym. These are huge benefits. Even if we said the TCO of an EV was, let's say, the same as an ICE vehicle, we can still motivate people to buy these vehicles because charging can become more convenient than refueling.
Yeah.
Yeah, what you said, I mean, having that certification for integrations and following the standards, I think that's a great idea. And just building on that, I think the industry is big enough nowadays to also catch the eye of regulators. So the question is, should we drive the standardization and certification and whatnot together as an industry forward, or should we wait for the politicians to do that on behalf of us? I don't know, raise your hand, I mean, if you vote for the latter one.
So I wouldn't leave it up to the politicians. I would prefer to leave it up to the experts, and there are good industry associations working on these things. So maybe what we need to do is work on how do we get it quicker, because we're on the cusp of EVs going mainstream. In some countries, they are the predominant new vehicles sold, but this is going to catch up like wildfire across at least Europe over the next few years. So we need to make sure interoperability is not a big issue anymore. We need to make sure that CPOs can roll out charging stations quick enough to keep up with the demand, as well as the DSOs, that they can reinforce the grid to make sure that we can have enough charging points to satisfy the needs of EV drivers.
So interoperability is obviously key when we're looking at public charging points, but many people actually may want to have their private charging option. I'm just curious to hear, they obviously are very different in how they're set up, and they have different challenges when we're looking at public versus private charging infrastructure. But do you think an EV charging company could actually focus on both and create a type of business model that can accommodate these different charging locations so consumers can seamlessly charge at home and charge when on the go? Yeah?
Yes, absolutely. We're doing that today. I mean, it depends on the way you set up the business and the partnership you're on board. Some of them, they have their main thrive within the B2C domain, that means private consumers. And we are delivering a lot of solutions to people at home, but we don't have a direct link from our side to the B2C people. So today, I mean, we are supporting both the business side, that's the corporate side, that's also the more public side, municipalities, but public charging around in the cities and on the highways, the ultra-fast chargers, for instance, and definitely also the B2C side. So it's the whole portfolio. It doesn't have to be like that, but I mean, it was part of our strategy to do it that way. I think when just looking around on the interoperability that has been discussed a lot, of course, I fully agree with a lot of the words that have been said. And one thing that I can see out there is that now we have a lot of EVs coming in. During the summer, there have been long queues to be able to charge on the public infrastructure, especially the fast and the ultra-fast chargers, the DC chargers. So it's quite obvious that there's some frustration out there due to that there's not a lot of chargers, there's definitely not enough chargers compared to the people who really want to charge. And just thinking a little bit about what you mentioned before, if you have a charger at home, then according to the figures, we have 80% to 90% of people that have a charger at home in the garage. They will charge, the 89% at home, while the remaining time will be on public chargers, either AC or DC chargers when they are driving around. Living in a city, you might not have your own private charger, and therefore you have to lean on the public chargers available in the neighborhood.
I would say that this is one of the beauty of electric cars is actually that you can charge almost everywhere, and that's what with the idea of how we are selling these cars to the people. Now, in a oil and gas world, the business model is very simple. You just come to some specific location and you are buying liquid. Basically, you're coming to the store all the time when you need something. Here, you can have various technologies. You can have various players. It's again adding to the complexity of this business, and that's what I just said. It's like multiple players, and at the end we talk only about the public charging, and then another completely different area is private charging, where there could be as well different use cases. Someone has very simple access to the home charger in the garage, and then you have office building where you have the building where you have 100 flats, and you need to first of all technically solve how to charge all these vehicles, which is very, very big, complex technically, and then you want to make the advantage of the fact that the cars is able to charge everywhere, as well translate to the people in a way that it's very user-friendly. So I have all my charging experience in one place, regardless if I charge at home, at work, in public. This gives a really a lot of challenges in front of us, but I think it's very critical that the biggest one of the biggest advantage of the electric cars, that they can charge everywhere and do not have to go all the time to the store and buy something. We translate in a great user experience. Therefore, I think combining of the private and public charging is a key challenge, but we should go for it. We should go for it.
Just a quick reminder to our participants, I still have a few more questions for our panelists, but we do plan on opening up the floor for your questions and comments, so you can already start sending them via the app, and we'll get to them in the last section of our panel session. But the next thing I would love to hear your thoughts on is also the motto of this year's conference, that we're unraveling the digital DNA of the EV ecosystem. So how relevant do you think the digital EV ecosystem is for even the future success of your own companies?
So the way I see it, at least, and we in Plugsurfing, we like to think that, for example, we are the heart of EV ecosystem. I mean, digital heart of it. So as already, mentioned by everyone here, it all is based on information. Discovery of the chargers, initiating charging sessions, managing the payments, even managing the chargers. That's done in a digital way. So it's purely digital business from that perspective, and that's what Spirii is doing as well. So it's digital. You can't get away from it. And even if you focus your business model on hardware, cars or chargers, you still need to take that digital angle into account when setting up the business.
I definitely fully agree. I mean, the whole future from here is based on digital development. I mean, all the means, the tools that we need to fulfill what we know. Also, the issue with the the pricing of the electricity. We cannot fix that, but we can maybe work together to ensure that also the dynamic prices are reflected. I think here, maybe since we're sitting here in Hobject, then it's also maybe worth mentioning that when doing roaming, could be Hobject or some of the other platforms, I think it's super important to be able to reflect the dynamic pricing through the roaming platform as well, because that could help us deliver a solution to the CPOs so that they don't lose too much and thereby have to do drastic means. And all these things is something that we can solve digitally, like also, as you mentioned, the payment systems and many of the other developments. All these things can be done in the digital sphere. So I guess our future, it sounds a little bit blunt, but maybe the future is digital somehow. Sounds good, yeah.
Yeah, I would fully agree. I think EV charging is mostly a digital business, to be honest. Like in terms of physically charging the battery, that mostly always works. When something goes wrong, it's usually the digital communication between one of the actors involved in this value chain. But you brought up an interesting topic, and if you don't mind, I have a question for you. You spoke about the dynamic pricing, which is really interesting, but the way I look at this, and I don't have an answer to it, but why would we need dynamic pricing? Usually it's because the DSO has an issue, so he's giving the CPO an incentive to charge later, let's say, right? So I have congestion on the grid. It's going to be cheaper in an hour's time. So try charge then. That's great. The CPO can forward that on, but the end customer doesn't pay the CPO price. He pays the EMSP price, and most EMSPs I know are tending towards these flat rate prices. So even if you have dynamic tariffs, currently, the way I see it, there's a bit of a break between the end customer, the person whose behavior we're trying to change. So what would your response to that be? How would you do that? Because as an EMSP, you don't actually have a grid problem at all.
Let me try, and if I miss a few points, then just let me know. I personally do not believe in a sort of flat rate arrangement. I believe more in a pay as you go, so you're not forced to pay maybe a huge subscription fee to somebody, and you might not even use their charges. So I think the idea of charging where you go, it could be at home, it could be on a highway or in a city like in Berlin, then you charge and you pay for whatever charging you have there. One of the problems with the CPOs, or for the CPOs, is that the pricing that they put on their infrastructure equipment is usually fixed, and that means that the price they have now might be much lower than the actual price that they have to pay. So the dynamic pricing is giving them support to change their pricing according to the cost of the electricity that they have to pay to the DSO, for instance. And this is something we are doing today. There are not a lot yet that are requesting it, but I really feel that this is it will be a wave of requests that people will lose money if they are not able to reflect the current price fast enough. I mean, if you're stuck with a price for, say, 2 months, then there's a risk bound to it. You might lose a lot of money, or you might gain a lot of money. And if you don't want to lose money, then the price might be set too high, which also has an impact on the user side and the whole industry. So reflecting the dynamic pricing, which sounds easy, it's not that easy, it depends on the model that you implement. I think it's necessary, and also to do it as fast as we can within the various roaming hubs involved. Was that answer enough?
Yeah, that answers my question, let's say, to some extent. I'm still just curious about if the CPO has dynamic pricing, at least a lot of the EMSPs I know, that doesn't affect their end customer, and that's whose behavior you're ultimately trying to adjust, right? And in my opinion, especially with DC charging, most people don't really care if it's 50 cents or 55 cents. If I need to charge, I need to charge. I'm traveling somewhere. Same as, I did a long trip over the weekend, and when I needed to refuel, I just refueled because I don't care what it is. There's not much price elasticity when I need to refuel. But where I think we have a lot of advantage is more on the long dwell time, potentially AC charging. So it could be workplace, it could be home charging, where this vehicle only needs a couple hours to charge, but it's parked here for 8+ hours. Then there's a lot of flexibility to move that vehicle around. Again, we come into this digital sphere, and how do we get that to work properly, of course. I'm just curious as if the CPOs offer dynamic pricing, how that actually ends up affecting the end customer.
I think Tatu had a few thoughts. Exactly. Yep. Go ahead, please.
Well, that's something that has a lot to do also with the standardization. Once again, I keep returning to that point every time, but we need to agree on how to pass that through. There are in Europe, lots of differences in the electricity market itself, and the pricing rules for even EMSPs, they differ and vary from country to country. We have in Germany flat rate due to price transparency regulation related issues. We don't have that in the Nordics. But getting back to that dynamic pricing, it's also a great way to connect the EV charging ecosystem to the energy industry itself. We all know what will happen when there will be more and more intermittent energy production in the system. So flexibility is needed. And just, EV chargers, they could actually help the power system itself, and then bring also lower prices for customers.
Yeah, just if I can add this and to partially answer a question. just to comment that the dynamic pricing doesn't have to reflect only the scarcity of electricity, but as well scarcity of equipment. So, for example, if you have congestion on the charging hub and you want to move people and convince them not to use the hub at that moment, that's as well another thing. But I think the solution is quite straightforward. I think what we will see first is a proper implementation of dynamic pricing in a closed ecosystem in a situation where the CPO is as well the EMP, because it doesn't go through all these stages of roaming platform, one of them being Hubject, and this kind of things where a lot of things could get wrong. Absolutely critical that the price signal gets to the customer. And so probably we'll see it in a closed ecosystems first. And when it works, when the standards will be done, we learn how to do it. Then as well, there is a space to do a little bit more complicated things when the CPO is not the same as the EMP, and they already need to exchange the information between themselves.
That's a good point. Let me just throw in a thought, if I may. I fully agree on when you are traveling long haul, you need DC charging, whatever the price is. But just a thought about, if you're living in the city and you don't have your own charger and you are bound to charge at public charges, when you arrive at, say, 5, 6, 7 o'clock coming home from work, you want to put the car for charging and then you don't want to pick it up before the next morning. And if you're happy with that the car is full, then you might want to play around with your big green heart, like, I don't want to charge the car before the CO2 content is low enough, but I know that I will stay here until the morning, so it doesn't matter exactly when I charge how much, as long as it's full or nearly full in the morning. It could also be the pricing, if we have dynamic pricing. It could be that you don't want to start the charging before, say, 11 o'clock in the evening. You will probably pick it up 6 or 7 or 8 in the morning anyways. So charging when it's cheap or CO2 friendly might be interesting, even though it's public charges for the night shift, so to speak, because if it's the daytime and you need to remove the car within 2-3 hours, then you might not be able to think those thoughts. But leaving it for the night, you can play around with some societal sort of interesting factors, as well as maybe even saving some money.
Maybe if I just, it's absolutely clear that the biggest advantage of electric vehicle when it comes to the charging can only be achieved if there is a link between the driver and someone who is managing the charging infrastructure. There needs to be a communication, a proper communication. That's as well the reason why I personally don't like so much the idea with the payment terminal, because the payment terminal basically build a wall between the driver and the operator. We don't know who is it, we don't know where they go, we don't know how to communicate with these people. So I see the payment terminal as a kind of a hot fix for the problems which we have as an industry, and we need to admit that we have as a problem, as we have discussed, that basically this proper flow of information doesn't work yet across the companies. So we have a hot fix of payment terminals, but I believe strongly that the future actually will go in a much more stronger digitalization, better flow of information, and all these things like a proper dynamic pricing where we are getting the inputs from the drivers and are enabled then to act somehow on the charger and enabled us to act somehow on the energy market at the end is the proper way forward.
So we have a bunch of questions that have already been sent in by our participants, so why don't we pause and take a look at what our audience members would like to know about. So I believe we already had several questions sent in, which should, there they go. Okay, so Andreas is asking, do you think Plug and Charge will work with all the cross-interest from OEMs, EMPs, CPOs, limited roaming, etc.? And if so, what do you think needs to be solved for it to work? So who would like to tackle this question first? Sure.
Yeah, I'm a little bit on thin ice here, but it's an interesting question, I think, and it has been circling around for some years now. Some of the thoughts is that Plug and Charge will change the ownership of the customer from one entity to another. Some of the discussions I've overheard is that the OEMs will then be the owner of the customers. But just putting yourself in the sort of customer position, not to point on any car brands, but I happen to have a Tesla right now. I will switch it for sure. to a Lucid later. But the whole feeling when you come to a supercharging station, you just plug in the cable and it charges. You don't have to do much more. It's quite convenient. I'm not saying that we need to adopt the Tesla way of doing it. That's also in the ISO 15118. Thought about standards and how to do this. But just the whole feeling from the customer side of being able to do that, I think it's super interesting. And whatever discussions we have there on customer ownership, it will come whether we like it or not, because the customers will decide.
Yeah, go ahead.
I can fully agree. Like the customer experience, plugging and running it, it's perfect. The thing is that the plug and charge is basically nothing less and nothing more than the way of authentication. It means that all these things which we have been talking about last half an hour basically still needs to be in place, because you still have an EMP, you still have a CPO, you need to go through some roaming platform. It's even a little bit more complicated in certain extent. So if we do not do it right with a RFID card as an industry, as a workflow of data, we'll probably not doing right with the plug and charge. If we will be successful with the plug and charge for 80% out of 100, it will be a disaster as it is now with the EMP. So we need to strive to better work with these things and strive to success rate of 99-point-something%. And so in this respect, plug and charge from a customer perspective is really interesting thing, but it has to work, and all these things, communications between EMP, CPOs, OEMs needs to work first.
Yeah, so is plug and charge critical for charging a vehicle? No. Does it make it more convenient and more fun? Absolutely. So to answer the question, like technically, will it work across all CPOs, EMSPs? All no. Majority in the future, probably, right? Because there will be some CPOs that are perhaps just interested in AC charging, and they're going to do that with PWM. There's no digital communication, and these things will never work with plug and charge. So I don't think we'll ever get to 100% coverage. I think most OEMs, most EMSPs, most CPOs will. How I see this evolving over the next few years is today, plug and charge is certainly advantageous to the OEM because it allows us to own that customer, because most OEMs today, plug and charge works with their EMSP solution, whether it's built in-house or white labeled, but you need to use the OEM's charging service for plug and charge. However, that is changing. OEMs will start opening up to say, okay, I'll let you install whatever contract certificates you need in the car so you can choose your own EMSP, and maybe you can even have multiple, and the vehicle's so smart that when you plug in, it chooses the cheapest tariff or whatever the case may be. I think we will see stuff like that happening. Where, however, plug and charge goes from beyond being just a nice comfort thing and where it becomes a necessity is when we start talking about autonomous driving, or at least autonomous parking. Then we have to have plug and charge, because what's the point in letting the vehicle park itself and then running up behind it and authenticating the charging session? Makes no sense. It's also very advantageous to car sharing models where you don't have to give every driver an EMSP card and hope he puts it back in the glove box. Rather, the vehicle knows, okay, I'm charging at this time, the car was registered to Barry, so that invoice goes on his bill. So there's many advantages of plug and charge besides just, wow, this is super cool and nifty. I think it's something that is a convenience factor today, but becomes more and more of a must factor as we evolve in the automotive industry.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Let's move on to our next question. So Philip asks, which business models or combination of business models do you expect to succeed in the long term? Some head scratching happening here.
It's a good question.
We have only good
relevant.
questions from our participants, of course. So who's going to go out on a limb?
I'll throw myself into it to see how deep the water is. Yeah, well, the short answer, I think, is I believe in a business model that allows, an open model, a model that allows people to travel and charge where they go, more than the more protective models where you have maybe a monthly fee of high amounts, and where you are bound to specific CPOs or EMPs around, with whatever they can help you with. So I believe, well, it's not very clear, but I definitely believe in an open model, but I believe in the business models that also take into account some of the advanced features to allow the owners of infrastructure or other partners to do the things that they need in order to survive, including dynamic pricing and all that stuff.
Peter?
Oh, it's a tough question, but I think what needs to be done definitely is I touched that before, it's the number of players and interaction needs to decrease. Some kind of consolidation, obviously not forced consolidation, but market-driven consolidation. I think we will see the several large integrated players in a similar way as we see it in telecom, where you have players which run the infrastructure, have a robust IT systems, and face the customers as an integrated model. We have a few of them in telecom business in Europe, maybe 10. I think that some kind of a consolidation in our business will be there as well. But I'm not saying that there will not going to be a space for smaller players or specialized players which will play a specific role. But generally, high level, I think we need to go down with the number of interactions and number of players in the industry.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think also one thing, of course, well, let's assume that by 2030, EVs are true mainstream. Half of the cars maybe are on the road are EVs, or at least new sales. That means that the business needs to scale. And I believe critical success factor for businesses to succeed in that world is that they can scale the operation without scaling their cost base, pure economics. How to do that? I mean, once again, getting to my favorite subject of making the data better, so that you wouldn't kind of scale the problems while you scale the volume, so that you would be able to actually operate efficiently to serve the customers. I don't believe there will be one single feature that would be a game changer and move everything to one combined CPO EMP type of company. That won't happen. But the companies who will be able to scale, who will be able to provide the service to the customers in a reliable manner, so that, I mean, the information you have about the chargers is correct. When you go to the charger, the plug and charge works every time, etc. It's about reliability and making the car charging easy. I mean, in a way, even more dull, less surprises.
Let's try and get to a couple of more questions from our participants. Can we pull up the next one? So Ariane is asking, to stimulate interoperability, should CPOs be forced to open their network for roaming? Oh, some strong opinions. Okay, Torben, maybe we can start with you and then go.
I'm so eager, sorry.
To Tatu.
Yeah, my personal belief is that any public charges, public accessible charges standing on public ground should be forced open to the public. That was maybe a super short answer, but I think so. If we could include semi-public charging, I don't think we can, but if we could, I think also it would be a good idea. So things accessible to the public should be forced public, but I don't think we can go beyond what is actually standing on public ground.
Keep your microphone close.
Yeah, and what I was about to say was a bit opposite. Ooh, so my counter question would be more like, would any CPO afford not opening up their network in the long run?
So my opinion from the OEM side is I would love to see all CPOs open up to roaming, that we can just offer our customers the most seamless experience. Here's a charging card, whatever charging station you find, it doesn't matter the color, the name, it's going to work. That's an ideal world. I think in reality, we cannot force the CPOs to do it. I think there's enough motivation for them to want to do that. They want to drive traffic to their network. But I think we will still find CPOs that are maybe not opening up to roaming, but they're publicly opened. Anybody can use that network. You just may have to download their specific app. And it's up to the CPO to decide, is that detrimental to my business, or would I have more traffic if I open it up to roaming? Because the reality is, whether I have an EMSP service from the OEM or any third party that I can download in the App Store, if your network is not supported by that EMSP, I'm just not going to find it in my navigation, so I'm not going to drive there. So I think we may not even need to force them to do that. I mean, that's a very strong word. I think most will want to open up their networks. But of course, there could always be the one or two that decide for whatever strategic reasons, they're going to have a closed system, but it's still open to the public.
Yeah.
What I was observing during past several years was a wave where the CPOs try to block this and basically try to navigate everybody to download on web, and it was really like strong feeling in the industry that I should not lose my advantage because I invested so much into the hardware. I think it's a different now. I think there's much more open network, or much more open-minded the CPOs to open to the other EMPs. Nevertheless, and plus we still have this necessity to provide ad hoc charging. So even without downloading the app, you need to be able to charge. But there is another view on that. That's basically we as a CPO. There is more than 100 EMPs now in Europe, and the quality of the service provided by them is varying. Sometimes very excellent, sometimes very bad. If someone is coming to our charger and the charger doesn't work, they are standing in front of our logo, in front of our brand, and basically has a negative experience. So we want to be very selective in a way that which EMP we are working and making sure that this EMP is doing it right, because if they do, then our perception of the customers could be negative as well towards us. So I think much more open, but I would say the quality is more important than the quantity in this respect.
I guess that works both ways, right? Because some CPOs are better than others.
Absolutely.
So from an
Absolutely.
EMP point of view, they don't want to send their customers to
Absolutely.
subpar networks, if I can say that.
Okay, last quick thought on this topic from Torben.
Yeah, I just want to dive into one real case, just taking a case from Denmark, where we actually had that exact discussion about 1.5 years ago. And we could not enforce it, but we did it the way that all the CPOs that was part of the eMobility branch, those that signed an agreement, they pushed out all the public accessible chargers to everyone. You cannot force people, I mean EMPs, to adopt the chargers or implement the chargers in their network. But if you as a CPO are forced to push them out, then you have done your share, they're public accessible, and then it's up to the EMPs to make sure that they can be used by their apps and so on if they wish to.
Sorry, just maybe final comment. Let's not forget that making a CPO connected to the EMP is not one day work. It's not a one single, it's not a work which you done and make and it's done. You need to constantly make sure that the connection works. You need to have a processes to checking up if the data are exchanged properly and so on and so forth. So therefore, I think it's critical that the number of interaction is limited to the extent which you still can manage on operational level. So it's not just connect and forget. You need to connect and work together constantly.
Okay, we have less than 5 minutes until our well-deserved lunch break. Let's just have a look at one more question, just to give our participants a chance to pose their questions to our panel. Gentlemen, if you can keep your answers very short. No, it's not easy. So what role will roaming play in the future? Wouldn't credit cards be a much simpler solution? From Michel. So quick answer.
Credit cards will play a role in the future, but it would be pretty hard to have a functioning plug and charge application, for example, without having some sort of roaming in place. So I see that roaming will exist.
I see that the CCV terminals that are entering into the eMobility sphere, they serve a certain purpose, but we can do much more in the digital sphere with apps and other means, where we can support the business cases of the involved parties, the CPOs, EMPs, so that we can make a multiple pricing strategy depending on the customer segment. You have whatever price, and this cannot be done currently with the credit card solution. So currently, I would say we have a much stronger solution with apps and other good things, even RFID cards, than we do with the CCV terminals. Maybe this will change in the future, I don't know.
I said it already. I think this payment terminals is a quick fix solution for the problems which the industry has at the moment, but it's not a permanent thing. And I believe that the number of transactions made via payment terminals will remain very low.
Yeah, so I think it's very market specific. I think in Europe, yes, we have to have roaming because we just have so many players in the market, so many EMPs, so many CPOs. Other markets, it may not be necessary just because the number of CPOs is like 2 or 3, right? So you don't necessarily need it. You pick one network, they're all more or less the same. As far as the credit cards go, at least for now, because of a lot of the issues we see with charging, I would like to see credit cards stay. Even if it's not the best user experience, it is a relatively robust fallback experience. If I rock up at a station and it's not supported by my EMSP, or my EMSP backend is currently down for that 1 hour, I mean, this happened to me 2 weeks ago. Got to the charging station, card wouldn't work, had to pull out a second card. I don't want customers to have multiple cards. In that case, okay, there seems to be a problem in the back end, whatever it is, pull out the credit card. So I see this, at least for now, until we know that this is super, super robust. And back to the standardization, credit cards are a necessary fail-safe, let's say, to make sure that the customer can charge. Because the worst thing we want is to be stranded on the highway with like a 5% state of charge.
Gentlemen, we're going to have to leave it there. So thank you so much to Barry, Torben, Peter, and Tatu for sharing all of your insights with us. Let's have a round of applause for our panelists.